This is TAZA, a knowledge series brought to you by Alliance for Coffee Excellence and Cup of Excellence.
As Anna said, this is our fourth in this new series of communication. This was originally going to be an in-person event next Saturday here in Portland, which is where ACE's offices and lab is. And unfortunately, due to the COVID-19, we had to rethink this, and we felt real strongly about continuing this and doing it through a webinar structure so that we could share information on the transaction guide, and we could also share Christophe Montagnon's impact report that he's been working on as it pertains to our 20 years of Cup of Excellence programming. And so we wanted to move forward. We know that it's a challenging time for many of us in the industry around the world and the world itself. And this information is, we think, vital and important. And it comes at a time when, you know, people need as much support as they can. And we hope that this provides some information, some deep thinking, some questions. And we're very happy that you're here. I will have at the end of our questions at the end, for those that are able to stay on and would like to stay on, some updates on the COE programming, especially our Ethiopia program, which is still about to happen. And I'll get to some of that information at the very end. And also, I am excited to be part, or ACE is to be a part of the data donor work with Emory and the guide. And we'll let Chad Trewick, a lifelong friend and colleague from Resto Pro Cafe, and he is going to take it from here and introduce himself and Peter, and here you go.
Great. Good morning, good afternoon, whatever time it is, wherever you are. As Darren said, we're excited to have you join us for what we hope is an important conversation and something to consider, particularly during this difficult time when I think we all kind of share the priority of making sure that coffee remain a viable business for all of us involved. So the Specialty Coffee Transaction Guide is a tool that really started, discussions around it started in 2017 when my colleague, Peter Roberts' former colleague, Ben, came up to me after a presentation in Seattle and said, hey, I think you should look into some of the work that we're doing at Emory University. And this kind of turned into a good long conversation between Peter and myself and Peter's colleague Ben around the different ways that we could evolve that work to be more inclusive and hopefully more representative of what kind of pricing behaviors we're seeing in the specialty coffee industry. And so in 2018, then we had organized at the following Seattle Expo a meeting of industry innovators and progressive actors who would, we wanted to explore the idea with them, would they contribute to a project like this? And then in December of 2018, we had our first guide. So Peter, go to the next slide, please. So the Specialty Coffee Transaction Guide is a tool, a set of charts and tables and information that's created by working with a set of data donors who annually contribute their specialty coffee contract information from recent harvest. The information they contribute are free on board or FOB prices. Before you start having doubts in your mind about whether FOB is the right number or not, please know that we recognize it is not the end all be all of numbers. It is a number that we all have access to and can begin to understand more about, and can contextualize that number in a lot of different environments and a lot of different metrics and considerations related to cost of production, internal country costs, living wage, things like that. But FOB does not talk about what farmers themselves get. FOB talks about the price that was traded before that coffee left the producing country. So what we do is we aggregate and organize these anonymized prices to produce this annual set of tables to really look into price distributions for specialty coffee sold at different qualities and quantities and all grown in different places, really trying to look at and organize that data in a way that gives us information and insights. We use that data in a series of research efforts to really bolster our understanding as an industry about what some of those pricing dynamics are. Why are certain coffees more and less expensive? Why are smaller lots priced more expensively than larger lots in many cases, for example? Go ahead, Peter. And so what problem does the guide address? There is a large problem in the specialty coffee industry, specifically where the majority of transactions use the commodity market as a price discovery mechanism. We know that the level of that commodity market has hovered at or dangerously below the cost to produce for some years now. And we really feel like more information and connectivity within the sector should really encourage us all to consider the long-term viability of our supply of specialty coffee, and certainly consider the short-term and a sustainable market equity related to who all can win when they're in the specialty coffee industry. And we have a firm belief that more information, changing that information environment, is going to include more winners, let's say, in the value chain. So obviously sellers and buyers of coffee cannot negotiate without a different set of information and benchmarks. The really cool thing about why we're working together with ACE and COE is that both organizations represent a price discovery alternative to the commodity market. And I mean, COE has been successful for years and worked really hard on becoming this a price discovery alternative. And that's what we are working to become as well at the Specialty Coffee Transaction Guide. Both programs are tailored to address the needs of sellers and buyers of differentiated coffee, not commodity coffee. COE launched in 1999, and our first guide was in 2008. And so we're excited to be in partnership here, certainly in this TAZA series in this webinar. And long-term, we're excited to be in partnership with COE as a data donor and a thought partner, really looking at how we can contribute to the dialogue around pricing in the specialty coffee industry. And with that, I believe I turn it over to, well, first I want to acknowledge the list of data donors here. We have 58 data donors, and we have 8 more who have signed on since January 1st, including COE and Alliance for Coffee Excellence. And so you can see on the list here, on the logos, we have a wide range of innovative industry actors who are roasters, importers, exporters, cooperatives, producers, and some others. And so really looking to ongoing increase the number of data donors. We know the bigger the group, the and now I'm gonna introduce my esteemed colleague, professor at Emory University, who, when we first started to talk, was, I think, pretty skeptical that a coffee industry like ours would come together and really rally behind a project like this, working to really make sure that we are having a robust and rich conversation around the data in our industry. And so, Peter, I appreciate your efforts always. And I'm excited to be working with you, and please carry on.
All right. Thanks very much. If anyone on the panel, if my voice goes in or out, sort of give me one of those faces that people do when people can't hear you and stuff. But I want to run through a little bit. Chad did a wonderful job of talking about what it takes to gather a progressive group of industry stakeholders together to produce data. I want to talk a little bit about the tables from the 2019 guide, Mostly just giving kind of a little bit of a teaser and talk about the way we think that this information contributes to the development of the sector. But I put this this piece up first because a lot of the discussion that we face relates to the data donors and the representativeness of the data donors and how much data and how much of the specialty coffee market. But I want to be the data by themselves and the tables do very little if they don't contribute to conversations. So in the last 3 or 4 months, we spent a lot of time thinking about how do we get more folks in different coffee producing countries to be accessing the information, not necessarily because we believe that they contain specific hidden truths, but just because if people at origin countries don't start having conversations about where their prices do and could sit in the overall market, then we feel that we're leaving an awful lot on the table. So a little bit of a plug for what we're doing moving forward. We have an initiative working with our friends at Promo Cafe to try to get 250 plus downloads in each of the producing countries so we can begin to have conversations like this with folks about, what do these prices mean and how do we push the industry forward. So want to make sure that, that people understand that, what we're producing here is, it's not a panacea, it's not a one shot, it's a tool. And if you think about the various stakeholders in the industry that would like to have better information, we can loosely organize these folks into 3 groups. The producers, the sellers, and the buyers are just very interested at any given point in time, whether last year's prices or the prices on offer, where do they sit relative to the distribution of available prices? Are my prices low? Are they okay? Are they high? And it's not that there's, again, truth or conclusion that comes from that, but the stimulus associated with knowing where you sit is extremely important. Farmer support organizations, we think we engage them in a slightly different way because they clearly have a direction in mind for prices, but they want to know whether some of their plans and goals are feasible, whether it's whether we can help the folks that we work on behalf of, to get better prices. And the final piece which sits underneath it all is there's a meta narrative, right, that grounds valuations and pricing in specialty coffee, and researchers and advocates and policymakers would like to be able to inject insights about whether and where prices that are realized exceed the cost of production, do they cover living wages, et cetera. We think that an aggregated set of actual recent FOB prices, again, does not answer any of those questions, but provides a context where those particular stakeholders can also do their work. So as you kind of go through this, keep in mind, when someone sees a table like this, which is our kind of intro figure, everybody looks at that $2.81 and goes, damn, $2.81, that's hardly ever the right price. We're sort of saying it's virtually never the right price. There's nothing right or wrong about a historical distribution of prices. It just tells you where the overall distribution was anchored. And whenever I talk to folks, whether Chad and I think the 5th percentile and the 95th percentile are every bit as important as the middle, because it defines a range. Like what's considered really good prices, what's considered close to unconscionably bad prices, and where does the middle sit? So as we go through all this, we tend to report centers of distributions, we report medians, but we also like people, and we believe that we'll benefit by a broader consideration, right, of again, where does my price sit relative to prevailing prices last year? Now, if you have the patience to work through tables, you'll eventually get to table 6, which basically says, wait a minute, that 280 is kind of weird because coffees are bought at different qualities, pot coffees are bought at different quantities, and we go, absolutely. And what we try to do in our aspiration to be like the quote unquote Kelly Blue Book for coffee is ultimately you should be able to look at kind of what's this transaction look like? Is it a relatively large lot of relatively ordinary specialty coffee? Or is it a relatively small lot of very, very fancy coffee? And I know that the friends at Cup of Excellence probably know where in this chart they tend to live, because most of the coffees that they kind of publicize and sell are in that 86 plus range, and most of them, right, are in those relatively small lots. So if you're in that kind of world, then you would navigate towards a different set of distributions than if you were selling containers of 80, 81 coffee. So this is the kind of thing that we would like to offer. And again, no one should look at historical prices and by itself say, oh my goodness, that's exactly the price that quote unquote should be paid for coffee. But people who sell coffees need to know where their prices lay relative to the distribution, and people buy them want the same set of information. So really take seriously the notion of benchmarking. It's not relative to ideal. It's not relative to nirvana. It's relative to what the market saw last year. And then this last piece is just, subject to the constraints of all the antitrust attorneys that are guiding us to this. We would like to sort of be somewhat, advisory. What we would like to see primarily from the numbers is, instead of everybody knowing, oh my goodness, look what happened to the seed price this week, right? The reference point really for selling next harvest's worth of coffee, right, is it a container at 83? Is it a micro lot at 87? Did it come from El Salvador and Guatemala? Can I flip to a set of references, low, middle, and high, and begin to have a conversation with myself and then others about what unsatisfactory prices look like, satisfactory prices look like, and exquisite prices look like? And that's the kind of piece that we want to do. That whole notion of the information and the context informs buyers and sellers of what a reasonable range for specific conversations look like. Right? Now, once you get past the idea that the data themselves are contextual and they just sort of sit in these tables, Chad and I and our team have become acutely aware that we have got to penetrate conversations. And this slide does little more except it shows Chad in a couple of different places. It shows me in a couple of different places. It shows Shauna. It shows Alejandro. It's really, really important, right, that people who want to see a more progressive foundation for pricing, which again, a more progressive foundation for pricing is not the same as what's the right price, right? We need this kind of information so we can have better conversations about prices. So it must anchor conversations. The second thing it has to do is it has to sort of get out of sort of this benign look at distributions, which is what our tables do. And it has to kind of allow us to go back and say, can we shed insights about, for example, what is the implications of certifications, right, on the distributions of prices? And this is something that we hope to release in the next 2 or 3 weeks. But it's information, again, tells nobody anything, but about the different kinds of observations that we see in different places. And what we would like to do is we would like, if you inject new information into a conversation and share it broadly, it sort of has that sort of grounding effect that we're all talking from the same base and we're all having similar conversations. In the future, we hope to develop the resources so that we can actually work with colleagues in different regions and in a lot of amazing projects around the world to link observed distributions of FOB prices to things like what are realized costs of production for different kinds of coffee in different areas, when and where and to what extent are coffee producers underwater or not. These are extremely important conversations that the transaction guide inputs into, even though it doesn't quote unquote provide answers. So very excited about conversations and about the research, and that hopefully the research drives conversations. This is the favorite question that Chad and I kind of came up with. I think it's the first time I got this was with a classroom full of students. Are you sure this is going to work? And my answer to this thing, the transaction guide by itself will quote unquote fix coffee? My answer is always absolutely not. Right? In no way, shape, or form does the simple provision, right, of updated information assure a better set of market outcomes. And the one thing that our data donors, when they got together en masse, have said, and this is a little bit of a paraphrase, so I apologize, Peter, when you present this information to us on the buying side, we're pretty comfortable with it. You may surprise us at the margin, right? But we're pretty comfortable with it. You have to do your heavy lifting at origin, right? Folks in the specialty coffee world, most folks have never had the opportunity to look at kind of a reasonable and aggregated set of prices that describe a relatively stable pattern of prices over time. You've got to get down to origin, and you have to basically make sure that the farmers, the producers, their kids, the next generation are able to look at the prices that the guide reveals and be able sort of to develop businesses and plans around those prices. So this latter thing that we're doing that we're very, very excited about, we're partnering with our friends down at Chroma Cafe, anchoring ourselves in Latin American regions, about doing what I kind of do with a lot of folks in business schools, is executive education for small women coffee farmers. Starting with an idea of, if we're able to stabilize prices, kind of in the direction or the vectors that are implied by the transaction guide, can you develop a business that you're excited about growing into over the next 5 or 10 years? It does then the courtesy of making sure that we're helping you build your expectations over the same information, right, that is actually provided on the buying side. But we also kind of offer that thing, you need to develop an identity and a story, right? You need to do business planning. You need to be able to look at your financials. We've done 3 of these so far, unbelievably powerful, but also, working with 15 out of, 25 million growers around the world's not going to do a lot by itself. So we're hoping to stimulate kind of a broader movement as we get more data donors, as we get more downloads, as we get more conversations, as we do more capacity building. Then I think that foundation for better pricing or more progressive pricing, becomes closer, to a reality. And so that's on purpose a relatively quick run over the top. In the course of becoming a data donor, some of you know this, I've asked you sort of for your favorite photos that sort of capture the work that you do, not have anything to do with COVID-19 or being trapped inside, but turn this into something that I find just very powerful. Because all of our data donors come together and show us various different vistas, different points and people along the specialty coffee value chain. And I think that united in this idea that says, there is a more progressive specialty coffee market out there that isn't, unilaterally tied to the commodity market, that actually, can create an awful lot more kind of like smiles and livelihoods. And once we get through, or as we get through this COVID-19 inflection, which is killing a lot, right, of taken for granted, we hope that we can kind of emerge into kind of a more positive world. So if you're out there and know some people that haven't downloaded the guide, it's www.transactionguide.coffee. And with that said, I think I turn things back over to Anna and Darren.
Thank you, Peter. Just a quick question. We have someone actually asking if, but answer live, if a company does not purchase most of their coffee on FOB terms, can they still be a data donee?
So for every person that comes to us that is normal, and then as a data aggregator I love, there's always 1 or 2 that do things a little bit differently. My instincts, right, is that if you don't kind of have kind of something that resembles FOB prices, kind of in your contracting regime, it would be a challenge. But whoever asked that question and people like it, one of the things that keeps life interesting is see how we can kind of open up and make the project more accessible to more folks. So, reach out to us, we'll have the conversation, and fingers crossed, we'll figure out something.
Thank you.
Anna, there is one other question that was on the chat before we move on to Christoph, and that is, are the prices indicated paid in the origin free on board, or are in the warehouse in the destination?
Oh, damn, that was intended to stump the academic, wasn't it? Chad, do you want to maybe jump in on that?
What we're capturing in the contracted data are the FOB prices paid to the last point of purchase at origin. So these are prices that, as best as we can control, represent the value of coffee before it left producing country.
Thanks.
Great. And we do have some other questions we'll take at the end. And I would like to move on to the next presentation by Christophe Montagnon, Dr. Christophe Montagnon. He has over 30 years working on coffee research and development worldwide. He founded the consulting company RD2 Vision in 2012 to advise for optimal investment in coffee production in the coffee production sector. Between 2016 and 2019, Christophe served as the World Coffee Research Chief Scientific Officer and was responsible for the scientific strategy of the organization in partnership with many national coffee research institutions around the world. We're delighted to have him here today. And I just wanted to make quick mention of the work that we've been doing with RD2 Vision in doing fingerprinting, and he'll go into this a little bit more, of